So it's important to work with communities, to organize in those communities. And it not only gives you community buy-in, it not only ensures that you are not going to make, or that you're not going to make as many cultural mistakes, but it does empower others to join your fight and become leaders instead of followers in it. And this is an example of one of our events. We worked with a young up-and-coming group in Terrace, and we live 2 hours away. So we helped organize the event, but our logo, our name is nowhere on it because we wanted to empower them. This group is now a leading NGO in northwestern BC. And they were inspired by a lot of the work that we did, and now, they're kicking our butt all over the place. We host other events, for example, the Skeena Swim with Ali Howard. We try to partner with community organizations because the community organizations that we're going to, they know their community, they know the best venue to host an event at, they know what admission prices to charge people, they know how to reach out in their own community, and they already have buy-in, usually from their community. And if we have something great, it's win-win because we get to partner with them and it helps our name, and hopefully by them partnering with us, it helps their name.
Shannon, I'm just going to interrupt you for a second because you're talking about awakening the Skeena. We're going to see a video in a couple of seconds, but do you mind just sharing with people what that campaign was all about, just very briefly?
Excellent, yes. Ali Howard was a chef up in the Kispiock Valley where I live. She's very quiet, very humble, does not like to be the center of attention, and she was very passionate about our campaign, specifically our Sacred Headwaters campaign. And she wanted to do something. She told me about a man who swims giant rivers all over the world named Martin Strel, and he's from Slovenia, and that I should contact him and have him consider swimming the Skeena. And I very jokingly mocked her and said, well, I know that you can swim. Why don't you swim the Skeena? And she looked at me and said, okay. And long story short, she swam the Skeena. She trained her butt off for 9 months. And here is this really quiet, humble, hardworking woman who swam the entire Skeena. And the long story that kind of goes with it, because this was a really big risk. The Skeena is one of, it's a K2 of whitewater, and she swam through these giant rapids. She united communities, and she did it in a way that was humble and was honest. She's now a hero of the North, and so a documentary was made about the swim and has won awards all over the International Film Festival circuit, and will be shown on Movie Central this fall. So definitely have a look out for it.
Just to give you an idea, how many kilometers, how long was the swim?
She swam 610 kilometers, took 26 days. She could have done it sooner, but we stopped and spent a day in each community as we swam by. And so it was really important to involve and unite the communities. It was more about celebrating the Skeena than it was about stopping bad development. So it really brought people down to the river. It connected them to each other, it connected them to the river, and it connected them to our work. So it was a really inspirational campaign event that has launched our work into a whole new level. So that's something that I'll talk about here in a little bit. Rule number 3 is know your demographics. So you have to remember you are not the person that you are trying to lobby or you're trying to inspire. You are already there. One of the things that really frustrates me when I see a campaign, for example, when people are reaching out to the Aboriginal youth community. Well, if you know your demographics, you would know that in the North, the average Aboriginal student graduates with a grade 3 reading level. So when people use words like, we are trying to contribute to the sustainable cultivation of a vibrant biodiversity subculture within the geological formation of the Northwest Geological Survey, all they hear is wah, wah, wah. So the people who read political papers, the people who read heavy reports are less than 10% of the population. So you have to make sure when you are reaching out to somebody, when you are trying to mobilize a certain group or an entire community, that you know who your target audience is and that you're inclusive in your materials. So a few examples. When Stats Canada, there was a poll that was done to sort of test people's comprehension of different issues. 72% of Canadians gave an answer for what they believe the definition of biodiversity is. So in our work, biodiversity is a common word. We use it in every third or fourth sentence. What we learned from doing this poll is biodiversity actually isn't a very good word to use. It means how does a full ecosystem environment, how does it interact with itself, and does it have lots of different flora and fauna that works well. Well, 2% of Canadians thought this was biodiversity. It was really interesting. So just remember, when you are communicating or when you're writing a press release or a report, that the average person does not have the capacity level that you do, especially if you graduated high school, and even more if you graduated from university. So just some other examples. People aren't necessarily going to read a text-heavy report. So the average person will take a look at a photograph like this. And if they want to understand what coal bed methane is, you can read the text. And I'm not saying that text shouldn't be included. It definitely should. But you need to illustrate what you're saying. So here we're talking about the sacred headwaters. Well, there's the sacred headwaters. You don't get that from reading text. You don't see how amazing and beautiful this place is. You don't see what the potential is. This is what coal bed methane looks like when it is fully developed. And you impose coal methane images on an image like that. It does not. This text does not give you that image. So
tell us about what that is, coal bed methane.
Coal methane. It's essentially an unconventional form of natural gas. You've got to drill thousands and thousands of wells to access it. So in the sacred headwaters, we're probably looking at between 4,000 and 7,000 wells. So it just looks like a giant grid, which you see in these photos here. The toxic chemicals into the ground, it gets into the groundwater, which then gets into the surface water and contaminates drinking water and habitat. And for us, it's important to understand that I always giggle when people call me an environmentalist. My dad is a rodeo stock contractor and a big game outfitter. My husband's a pipeline welder. For us, this was about common sense. And it's one of the biggest reasons for our success is because we didn't come at this from the approach that people were able to put us in a stereotypical tree-hugging freak show, wearing their tie-dyed shirts, eating something called tempeh. The fact that I come from this upbringing and the fact that I live that life gave us credibility in the community that this wasn't just a weird environmental campaign, that these were people who came at it from the respect of common sense. So we made this a common sense campaign and not an environmental campaign, which was more inclusive in nature. And from doing this, I should point out that we have never done this before. All of us in this organization have never run a campaign before. We've totally been learning as we go. My education is in chemistry, definitely not in campaign organizing or community building. And so I have learned from people who have come before me and who've been working on these things. And one of those people is Maren Smith. And Maren Smith is this great leader. She helped negotiate really successful campaigns such as the Great Bear Rainforest or Clayoquot Sound. And she's been doing this for years. And she sat down. She happens to be from this community. And she sat down with me and she said, I'm going to teach you the three most important rules. And this is one of them. And is that respect costs you nothing. And that was really important for me to hear because I was really angry that this development was going through. When I first started, I was, well, I'll get to that story in a little bit. So Maren taught me to be patient with people and to listen. And this is a really, well, here I am, first rally that I've ever spoken at. I've never spoken at a rally before. There's 450, 500 people there. They're riled up. They've got signs. I'm blown away that I'm even there. I'm pregnant with my daughter. And I got really passionate, and at this point I was really angry, and all of the sort of environmental community people in the area are looking at this woman saying, who the heck is this redneck? Oh my God. And I really played the role, and it wasn't that I was trying to play it, it was just that I was so upset that a government would actually allow such ridiculous development that once people got educated about, would definitely oppose it, which, in essence has happened. And people, I'm saying, what I want to say to Shell Oil and our government, and we're standing outside the government building. I flipped them the bird. I gave them the middle finger. And that's when Marion said, okay, Shannon, I see you have a lot of energy, and you're really passionate about this, but you never know who your allies are, and respect costs you nothing. Flipping the government the bird is disrespectful. And in short, our regional government, who I 2 years before flipped them the bird, were the ones that championed a moratorium against coal bed methane development in the sacred headwaters. Nobody purposely wants to make a bad decision. So what we did was create the climate for good decisions to be made. The second rule that Marion taught me was that every relationship is important. And that takes me to this man right here, Lindsay Everts. We were up at the Sacred Headwaters gathering with the Tahltan and several other First Nations who had all come together to unite to protect the Sacred Headwaters. I went up with an idea that I had worked on with Marion called the Sacred Headwaters Witness Protection Team. We said we would get people all over the world to sign up to be a witness for the Sacred Headwaters, to witness the injustice as it happened when Shell would try to go in and drill for this resource. And this man was there. And he came up to me after I gave my presentation on what the Sacred Headwaters witness team would look like, and he started asking me all these questions. I wanted to write him off. He had this long hair, he wore grubby old jeans, his ball cap, his shoes had holes in them, and I thought he was this hippie bum that lived up in the north who was probably a draft dodger or a war resistor. And, at one point I even thought he might, he might eat that crazy thing called tempeh. Anyway, Marion's rules were repeating themselves in my head as I'm talking to him. Respect costs you nothing. Every relationship is important. And so I sat down and we talked for 2.5 hours about what this project would look like. And then he said, well, would you like to come back to the cabin up the road? And I'd really like to sit down and work with you and your crew and figure this out. So I didn't want to go. I was tired. I was exhausted. The crew was exhausted, but we all went anyway because he said he would feed us. And we sat down and we talked about putting a camp up in the Sacred Headwaters. Like this is really pristine wilderness. Like to get to the Sacred Headwaters, you fly to Vancouver, you hop on a little bush plane, you fly for 2 hours to a place called Smithers, then you get in a truck and you drive for 6-7 hours way up north. You get to Iskut, you gas up, and then you drive 125 kilometers on a gravel road where there is nothing but beautiful mountains and landscape, and that's where we were. And so, when somebody plans to give you a home-cooked meal, you're pretty grateful. So we went, and we learned that building a camp up in the Sacred Headwaters, because of its remoteness, and to run it the entire summer, flying people in and out once a week, would cost us $17,000. And we were deflated, to say the least, because we knew that we could never do that. Our annual budget at that point was $5,000. So that was a bit overextended. And Lindsay said, well, I'd really like to support that. Yeah, I'll support that. And I looked at him and I said, well, thank you, Lindsay, but, every little bit helps, but, we're talking $17,000. He's like, yeah, I'll support that. I'll support you with $17,000. And I said, well, you can contribute. Yeah, that's great. Every bit helps, but $17,000 is just a little too wealthy for our blood. And he looked at me and he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, you have no idea who I am. And I agreed. Well, it turns out he's the CEO of Seattle Aerospace Engineering, and he's quite well-to.
He could afford the $17,000.
And he could afford the $17,000, and he did. And it was one of the single best campaign moves that ever happened, and he was the person that contributed to it. But if I had not taken Marion's advice, if I didn't give him the time, if I didn't respect what he was saying, if I didn't believe that every relationship was important, I would have shrugged him off. So lesson learned. When we did a swim, stopping in each community was really important to us, and it was building on every relationship is important, building the relationships with each community. This photograph here is our safety kayaker, Chris G., playing chess with the people of the village of Gitsagukla. Gitsagukla is this tiny village. It's probably one of the most impoverished villages in the whole Skeena Watershed, and it's the most beautiful and vibrant community, and the people are amazing. And it was one of our favorite places on the entire swim. People upstream didn't believe that we were even going to stop there. They invited us to sleep on their ancient sacred village site, which they had never done in their history, and it was the greatest honor. And it wouldn't have happened had we not stopped and spent quality time. This is a shot of Wade Davis giving a speech at a university about the sacred headwaters. Wade Davis is a National Geographic explorer in residence. He was voted one of the top sexiest men in science. Before I met him, I had written him off. I knew that we had some mutual friends, and I had written him off as somebody who, because of his station, would be pompous and patronizing and condescending. And so I never even tried to talk to him or build a relationship, because he's written countless books. He's had people play. Bill Pullman has played Wade Davis in a movie. Wade's appeared in several movies and documentaries. He hangs out with Cameron Diaz and David Suzuki and Bobby Kennedy, and I just wrote him off. And Marin's words again came to haunt me, and I ended up introducing myself to him. And it turns out Wade is actually a humble, incredible person who is really passionate about this place. And he has lent us a lot of credibility and a lot of his relationships, and he has helped us out immensely. And he is now one of our board members on our organization. And the final one that I want to talk about, Blair Leckstrom was the minister, the BC Minister of Energy, Mines and Petroleum Resources. And when governments make really bad decisions, our knee-jerk reaction is we want to beat them up. We want to take them to task. We had been working on a relationship with government so that they would make good decisions. And in the end, they did make a good decision. I think it's because we did kind of go at it in a humorous but respectful way. We didn't attack Blair Leckstrom. We just put him on a mutton buster and said, come on. And this ad appeared, again, this is playing the audience that we were in. This appeared in our local rodeo program, and people loved it, and people reacted, and they called Blair Leckstrom, telling him that they had seen the ad, and Blair laughed. It was great, and the moratorium was extended.
Amazing.
So, Vera?
It's amazing.
So, building your movement. This is something that people spend really little time on, and it's important to spend time on this. And the reason is when you are passionate and you're building a campaign and you're doing something, you're usually pressed for time. In our case, companies are coming in and they're drilling, and you're running around 200 miles an hour. You're not sleeping. You're not, you're lucky if you can cram some food in your throat because you're constantly on the go. And you don't take time to efficiently and thoughtfully build your movement. So if you don't do this, I can guarantee that your campaign is much more likely to fail than it is to succeed. You need to empower other people, and you need to support them and get them to the place that you are. Otherwise, you are building yourself into a place of isolation. If you are the only one that knows the issue and the only one that knows the facts and the only one that knows how to run the website or other things that you're working on with your campaign, then you've isolated yourself and you don't have anybody to fall back on or support you. So the other thing that you need to do is, in building your movement, is to drum up your foundation of support, and that's from your community and it's from outside your community. And we did that in the Sacred Headwaters campaign by finding something that we could all unite on. People are not united on development. Some people want development, some don't. When I first heard about coal bed methane, my knee-jerk reaction was great. My husband can work closer to home because he works in the oil and gas industry as a welder. However, when we talk about salmon, everybody in the north is united on salmon, just like everybody in Canada is likely united on child welfare or having happy, healthy children. In the north, we are definitely united on salmon. So we made salmon the iconic vision for the sacred headwaters. And we were able at that point to meet people where they're at. So it wasn't effective to go into, for example, into a municipal council meeting and do a presentation and say, we need to stop coal bed methane development. That's not going to get us any support. What we did is we put together a 20-minute presentation on coal bed methane 101. We presented it reasonably, calmly. We did not give the council an ultimatum. We allowed them to make their decision, and we didn't necessarily try to influence the decision outside of just giving them the facts. Here are the facts about coal bed methane. Here are the risks. Here are the rewards. Here's how it's done. And it was presented very calmly and very reasonably and with accurate information. And because we were able to do that, we were able to meet people where they were at. We were able to bring them to the place where they then said, we need to stop coal bed methane. But we just started with, you need to vote against or pass a resolution to oppose coal bed methane, they never would have done that. So that was at the regional government level, and we did that with our MLAs, our MPs, our municipal councils, our band councils, our regional districts, our chamber of commerce. We went into the places that were awkward for us, that I was physically and emotionally uncomfortable going to, because I was speaking to people that have known my family for years. You know, we are the farming, ranching, hunting, rodeo family in the north, and here I am talking about issues about the environment. So it was awkward and it was uncomfortable, but I knew that it was the right thing, and I spoke from that place. I also, in order to build our foundation, among with all the other people in our organization, we sat down with people, and we call it the 1,000 Cups of Coffee campaign, or the kitchen table level campaign. We would invite people or go to people's houses, friends, and we would start talking about this development and what it means, and we would basically educate them on the pros and the cons and why it happens, but we wouldn't push it. We would just simply give the facts, and we would let people come to their own decision, because when they're given the tools to make an informed decision, people are generally going to make the right decision. And that's what happened. So this is a lot of hard work. The other thing is it's really easy, especially if you're leading a campaign, to feel the need to have all the answers so that people will have confidence on you, or confidence with you. But I found the most amazing thing, and the way that people really bought in, was when they felt like they contributed and they helped. So if I knew the answer, a lot of times I would sit quietly and let somebody else come up with that same answer. And then, great idea. And they would feel great that they had contributed something that was so powerful to the campaign, and then they're a lifer, and then they're supporting us forever, and they're organizing events. So it's really important to be humble. Street chats, that's when you're talking to people on the street, you're walking through and you run into somebody and you get talking, and you just casually ask them, what do you think about this issue, this campaign? And then you strike up a conversation. And one about raising and empowering your army, you got to look behind you, because chances are you've got a lot of people supporting you, and if you don't use them, again, you're isolating yourself to do it alone. Here's an example of what happened in a very pro-development community. We've got First Nations leading a coal bed methane rally, followed by farmers and rednecks and commercial fishermen and sport fishermen and youth people and university students. It was amazing. 600 people marching in a tiny community in the north against coal bed methane development to a Shell open house. And as a result of all of this work, building our momentum, raising our army, and getting all of the communities to unanimously oppose this development, resulted in a resolution that was signed by every single community, every band council, every level of government in the north, and down to the provincial government, and they imposed a moratorium against Shell. And so this never would have happened if we had ever doubted that we would win. And this was Marin Smith's third rule to me. He said, when you are doing the right thing, you will win. It might not happen as fast as you want it to happen. It might not happen the way you want it to happen, but you will win. And you lose or waver in that confidence. It happens sometimes, but You've got to get back up and know that you will win. And Marin's phenomenal. She was also the person that said, don't be so caught up in doing. A lot of times when you plan a strategy, really great ideas for events or actions come up, but we had to put everything through a filter. Okay, we want to host a giant concert with Rochelle Van Zanten, the #1 female slide guitarist in Canada, and we want to get everybody rocking out and supporting the Sacred Headwaters. And Mary would sit me down and she would say, okay, how is that going to get government to make a decision against coal bed methane development in the Sacred Headwaters? And we'd have to put everything through that filter. There were some really great ideas, really good things to do, but they didn't actually contribute to our final goal. And we're a nonprofit. Budgets are tight, and you need to spend your money and your time wisely. Lots of problems come up. And in the end, most of the problems turned out to be opportunities. And the reason that they turned out to be opportunities is because we had other people in the watershed who are much more wiser than me, who have said, okay, when life gives you lemons, you got to make lemonade. An example of that is when the moratorium was right before it was put into place. Shell said that they were going to come do open houses in the communities, and they put out this great promotional video about how they were helping the Teltan and how much the Teltan appreciated Shell coming in and buying them a new school bus and contributing to their language projects. And we didn't have the hundreds of thousands of dollars to invest in the community. All we had was our passion and our work ethic. And so we took each of Shell's open houses and we made them an opportunity for us. So we had a little booth outside of each of Shell's open house with sort of the other side of the story. You know what? Great. Yeah, you should definitely go into the Shell open house, listen to everything they have to say. Here's the community side of the story. And it worked out. One of the people were so moved by information and stuff that they received at one of these that they didn't realize inside was the Shell open house, and they tried to donate money to us, to Shell, and the Shell employees had to say, actually, I think you mean to give that to the people outside. And nobody was going into the Shell open houses, so Shell then came outside, brought all their food, all their catering, and we sort of joined events. And it was actually really fun and humorous, and we've since then had a great relationship with the Shell PR team. And we all got talking there together, and people signed our resolutions in front of the Shell employees. And it was that was one of the events where the Shell PR team went back to their company and said, we are not going to get into these communities. We are not going to get their support. We were presenting, and people were still listening to these hooligans in the north. So I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier about empowering others, and I can't stress how important this is for several reasons. One, because if you don't empower others, you're going to be left to do it yourself. Two, you're going to create passion in other people to take initiative and to take action. And it's just a good overall thing to do. Here are some examples. The CLAW, which stands for Conservation Leadership Action Workshop, one of the things that we recognize is that as we attended workshops and seminars and learned how to do things like public speaking and learned how to organize campaigns and sat down with people like Marin Smith and Bruce Hill, who have all really, really helped us incredibly get to where we are today, we realized we need to offer these skills to other people so that we're not just depending on us to get it done. So we want to build a watershed-wide coalition that has capacity to deal with these issues because we are constantly faced with them, and there is no end of issues to fight. So if we empower others with the knowledge that we have, we are empowering others to take charge and to take the lead on their own issues and campaigns. The poster on the left, the Rochelle Van Zanten poster, we helped produce a music video for a song that she wrote for the Sacred Headwaters called My Country, which has won all sorts of awards, and we just released the video on Saturday. We've linked it here on this on presentation, but at the bottom you see two bands, the Racket and Blind Vinyl. Well, those band members' ages are 15 to 20, and they just did a tour with Rochelle, and they are on cloud nine because they got to tour with a woman who beat out Nickelback for Entertainer of the Year. They got to be rock stars for a week. And what better role model than Rochelle, who doesn't drink, who deals with life on the road with her mountain bike and cross-country running and skiing, as opposed to drugs and alcohol and partying. So they got to see that side, and these guys are pumped, and they want to live a lifestyle like Rochelle, as opposed to other sort of iconic musicians who dealt with things through drugs and alcohol. One of the things that happens when people work in social movement or environmental movement is burnout. And the reason is because these are very passionate and emotionally charged issues. And people are fighting for the right thing. They're not fighting to get a raise at work. They're not fighting to make sure the human resource team gives you the right Christmas bonus. These people are fighting sometimes for their very lives, for their culture, for the health of their children, to stop sexual violence and abuse. So it is really easy to burn yourself out, and it is really important to take care of yourself. So you always have to remember you are in it for the long haul. This is not a sprint. This is a marathon. Whether it's a K or a 100K marathon often remains to be unknown at the beginning. You need to not take it all on yourself, because if you burn out, if you aren't able to produce, if you are taking on so much that everything you're doing is done half-assed or sloppy, you are not helping the campaign. You are harming it. So you need to make sure that you maintain a balance. You need to set boundaries, and you need to celebrate when other people have that balance. And an example is, I was part of this women leadership group, and we would have a phone call once a week. It was almost like group therapy. And, how are things going this week? Oh, my God, I got so much going on. I don't know how I'm going to get it done. And my son is sick, and, I've got 6 meetings and 17 presentations and 47 conference calls, and everybody would have that same conversation. And then there's one woman who one week, the week before, she had said, you know what, I am not going to be part of an unbalanced lifestyle. What I'm going to be a part of is a balanced lifestyle, and I'm going to do it this week. I'm actually going to step forward and make a difference. I'm going to get work done. I'm going to spend quality time with my kids, and I'm going to create time for myself. And this week when she called in, everybody, gave their speech about how incredibly insane their week was and how hard they had to work and how exhausted they are. And they asked her, and she said, you know what? I actually had a great week. I only worked 45 hours last week. I went to a parent advisory committee meeting. I completed a painting for the first time in the last 6 years. And the response from the women and the judgment from the women, the other women on the phone call, were, well, she's not working hard enough. She's not doing anything. And people didn't value actually living and lead a balanced lifestyle because the campaigns, the nature of the campaigns that we work in are so passionate and so emotional that if somebody slacks off and they're not dedicating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we look at it as a bad work ethic. So make sure that you celebrate and encourage balance in others. Be brave. So this comes back to, when we got started in this was not, the sacred headwaters were not something on people's minds. One of the greatest examples of bravery are the Tahltan women who stood on the road in front of giant machinery, in front of the second largest corporation on the planet, in front of the RCMP and our government, and they blockaded. And they were arrested, and they were hauled to jail and hauled off the road in handcuffs in front of their children and their great-grandchildren. And children are crying, and they are wondering why the RCMP and these companies could do this. This is a land that they had lived on for thousands of years, that they hunt on, that they are there all the time. I've seen it in the fall. The place, there are camps and tents and people hunting everywhere. This is where they get their medicine from. This is where they go to rejuvenate themselves. This is where they teach their children about their culture. And here's this company, they're going to go turn into an industrial wasteland. And these women and these elders, one was in a wheelchair, standing on the road, blockading. Nobody had ever heard of the Sacred Headwaters. They've written about in newspapers being called dissidents and renegades, lawbreakers, and called down, and their own people were divided on the issue. So they were getting hissed at and spit at in their own community, and that's really difficult. But they were brave because they knew what was at stake and that they knew that what they were doing was right. And in the end, they united their community and just Last year, they were honored as the warriors of the Sacred Headwaters by their community, by their band council, by the Central Council, and by the community itself. So when you start a movement or you start something, often people there. You build it and you stick with it, and you get to the point where they're supporting you. This is an image of Allie Howard, who swam the Skeena. Here's this quiet woman who you don't usually hear boo from, and she's leaping into the Skeena River at a point in her swim. So what happened with the women of the Sacred Headwaters is people laughed at them first, and this is generally what happens with a new movement. It becomes a household name, and it becomes something that's accepted later. But when it starts, people laughed at them, and they scoffed at them, and then the women didn't. They held their ground. Then they got bullied, so people tried to scare them. None of those things worked, and in the end, they saw the light, and they joined the women. And that's generally what happens. There's this great video on YouTube about how movement starts. There's one guy, he's dancing all weird at this festival. Everybody's sitting down and they're laughing at him. And then somebody comes up and he starts dancing all weird with him as well. People sort of scoffing at that guy. And then a whole bunch of other people kind of start to come up. And then other guys come and say, you got to sit down so people can see. And then pretty soon the entire festival is up and dancing all weird. So just examples of needing to hold your ground. And that's basically all I have to tell you today. So if you have any questions, you can put them in the question and answer box. And if you want more info, these are really great links. I'd be happy to follow up with any of you and talk about the issues and campaigns that you're working on. And if you want to see Rochelle Van Zanten's music video that we just released on Saturday, and it's about the Tahltan women elders and the song that she wrote for the Sacred Headwaters, the link for it is right there.
I do encourage everyone to do that. I saw these videos; they're amazing. We are going to make the presentation available to everyone, including those links. And I do want to give you a really big thanks, Shannon. That was an amazing story about how you guys did it. And we do have a few minutes left. I am conscious of the time, that there's not that much time left, but maybe to get the ball rolling. You talked a lot about things that you did that were successful, things that worked. Do you want to just share maybe an example of one of the worst things that happened and how you dealt with that, what you learned from that?
You can learn as much from what didn't work as what did work. Well, there were several things that didn't work. I guess the best example, we put out this ad in the London Financial Times, and 17 different organizations contributed to paying for the ad because it was $15,000. It was this great ad of the Tahltan children, and they were holding up signs, get the shell out, save our sacred headwaters, you have no right to take our grandparents. And we were really proud of the ad because it was really powerful and very evocative, and it got a ton of response from people in Europe and the international audience. What we didn't do was talk to Tahltan and ask ahead of time if it was okay to use that image. We didn't ask permission. I mean, these are people's children, and we totally screwed up and didn't get their blessing to put their children's faces in an international paper with millions of readers. And it was very expensive, and as a result, we had to engage in a long process of figuring out how are we going to work together in the future, and how are we going to keep, ensure that we remain respectful of each other's boundaries. And so what it ended up leading to was important lessons and important sort of understandings on how we do things together, because at that point everybody was just sort of doing their own thing without a lot of collaboration, and that forced collaboration and respect of each other. So in the end, I learned a lot from it, but it was a really, really hard lesson. When you feel like you're helping somebody and you're trying to do everything you can to support them, and you offend them and you make them really angry and upset. I mean, that just hurts you right to your core. So it was a really important lesson, and one that I'm grateful for.
So that speaks to the rules you mentioned earlier about respecting and also building relationships. What I would take from that. In terms of working together, you did talk a lot about working together with different communities and sort of starting at from the starting point, and you build from that. Can you think of advice that you might want to give someone who has this really great idea that they want to explore, they want to campaign around, but no one's interested, or no one's interested yet? Can you sort of do it on your own? You talked a lot about how actually you shouldn't do it on your own. You have to get people involved. But what happens if there is something that someone has sort of almost proprietary knowledge about, or maybe just hasn't been effective yet in sort of sharing the importance of that to others and get people on board yet?
Well, it's really dependent on a campaign or the issue or the movement that they're trying to build. I think the short answer is if nobody's interested, you would give yourself the options or three things to test. One, increase the circle of the people that you're discussing it with. Two, ensure that you're delivering it in a way that people understand, and ask people for feedback. Why? Just out of curiosity, why do you not think this is important, or what would make you think it's important? What doesn't work for you? So asking people specifically for feedback, and people are often all too eager to give you an opinion. And then the third thing is to maybe actually entertain the idea that it's not a campaign that people are interested in because they might not believe in it, or they might not agree with you. And you're not going to find those things out unless you ask for that feedback. I have a question here from Carly. Do I have any other initiatives aside from the Skeena Watershed? So aside from the Sacred Headwaters campaign, we have several. We do lots of different community building activities and events. And one of the programs we have is called Youth on Water, where we take youth aged 17 to 21 and we teach them how to be whitewater rafting guides. And we spend a week with them, and we work with elders and the band council, so elders come and teach them about, the culture of the First Nations territory that we're in. We have biologists come in and teach the youth about the salmon. We have a swiftwater rescue tech come and certify them all with swiftwater rescue training. And in the end, these youth who often, some of them had never even been in a raft, are oaring themselves through Class 3 whitewater, and elders are inspired because these youth are kicking butt. They're doing something great outdoors that's active, and that is empowering them and building their confidence and self-esteem. And that has been an extremely successful program. I mean, we get emails from parents and youth care workers and RCMP talking about the impact that this program is having on these youth, and I'm happy to talk to people more about the initiatives. We've done several things, too many things. We did a giant art project called 10,000 Salmon, and that was, not all of our projects are political. Not all of them have to do with stopping bad development. A lot of it's about celebrating the community and getting people pumped about where they live, so inspiring hope instead of doom. And the second question was, how's the initiative been successful? Absolutely. It feels really good to be doing something like this, but the biggest reason we've been successful is because of our support. It's because of all our allies, all of the other organizations like Northwest Watch and Forest Ethics and Skeena Wild Conservation Trust and Friends of Wild Salmon. We do all of this stuff collaboratively. So when I'm talking to you about all these lessons, these are lessons that all of us learned together as a whole. So it's me delivering the message, but it comes from a giant cross-section of people up here.
You know what, Shannon? I think it'd be great to maybe share some of the names that you just mentioned, some of the other people that were that you did partner with on this initiative. I think that might be a good resource for people if you are willing to share that.
Absolutely.
And you know what? I see that we have 2 minutes before time is up, and so I do want to extend my thanks, big thanks, to you again. was an amazing presentation, and also for those who that listened in today and that participated. And I do encourage you to continue to send us emails if you have any more questions. First of all, to Shannon about her different initiatives, and also if you have any more questions or would like to get more involved in the Light a Spark campaign. As I mentioned at the top, this is the second in a series of webinars that we're hosting and putting on as part of the campaign, and I will send you a link to our website where you can get a lot more information about the Light a Spark campaign, and maybe just tell you very briefly that the next one coming up is on May 19th, and it's titled Transforming Power, New Youth Social Activism Strategies Around the World, and it's being presented by Judy Rebeck, which a lot of you may know, who is a social justice activist, a writer and educator, and so please mark that on your calendars. And the last thing I want to mention is that the Light a Spark campaign is something that everyone can get involved in. We have a section on our website where you can honor your spark, and spark could be a woman who has inspired you. So I do want to encourage you, I just clicked the wrong image here, encourage you to go to www.girlsactionfoundation.ca and check that out. And we are going to be making these materials available online. I'm going to be sending everyone an email to let you know where you can find them. And again, thanks so much for participating. And if you'd like, you can view it. I'm going to maybe end our session with Rachel Van Zatten's music video that Shannon was talking about that was just launched last Saturday. So thank you again for joining.
You will all need to press play on your screens in order to watch it. Thanks, everybody.